There is a huge situation that is emerging in the Russia-Ukraine front. And this time we are talking, as the war rages between Russia and Ukraine, a possible revolt from a very close aide of President Putin. What we understand right now is that as of now, there is a huge number of mercenaries marching towards Moscow. Amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, there is a big development coming in. The head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has vowed to go all the way to topple Russia's military leadership. The growing tension between the Kremlin and the Wagner Group comes after the former accused the group's chief of armed rebellion, while Russia's prosecutor general said that he was under investigation for armed rebellion. The Wagner mercenary group chief had accused the Russian military leadership of launching deadly missile strikes on his men and vowed to punish them for the same. Media reports suggest Prigozhin has also urged Russians to join his forces and punish the military leadership. The 62-year-old Yevgeny Prigozhin said his Wagner fighters had crossed the border from Ukraine into Russia, entering the city of Rostov on Don, adding his men would destroy anyone who stood in their way. The local governor, meanwhile, urged citizens there to keep calm and to stay indoors. The Wagner Group is a private army of mercenaries that has been fighting alongside the regular Russian army in Ukraine since the war broke out on February 24 last year. Prigozhin had launched a vocal criticism of Russia's military leadership in the recent times. Experts are now suggesting that the rising tensions between Russia and the Wagner Group would affect the outcomes of the more than a year-long Ukraine war. Well, mutiny against Putin and also an armed rebellion that is taking place, and this time by the private group of Wagner and its mercenary army. The Wagner Group, headed by Yevgeny Prigozhin, has moved his forces from Ukraine. It is being estimated that roughly 25,000 mercenaries have pledged loyalty to him, and the Wagner Group is said to have gone on a march towards Moscow, and the intention for it is said to be to punish the Russian military top brass for the decisions taken, and they have also said that they would march all the way, and it's not a rebellion but a sense of justice to be restored to them. This could affect the outcome of the year-long Ukraine war that has been going on. Well, the Russian Wagner Group has been known to be a very well-trained mercenary group and have also taken part in one of the bloodiest campaigns that the Russians had launched in Ukraine. They have retaken the city of Bakhmut, and this was the place where the Russian soldiers, the regular soldiers, had been tied down by a stiff Ukrainian resident. And this has resulted in the Wagner Group entering to break the Ukrainian resistance in Bakhmut, and they were successfully able to do it, though it was said to be a very bloody campaign that took place. Meanwhile, reports are coming in, and there are unconfirmed social media posts also put in place where Wagner Group's vehicles were seen surrounding the Ministry of Defense's building in the southern part of Russia, where the building is said to have been the cornerstone of planning for the Ukrainian invasion. And therefore, right now, what we see is that there is an effort on the part of the Russians themselves to ensure that this particular rebellion that has already happened is taken care of immediately, as it is threatening the outcome of the Ukrainian war and Russia's efforts to end the war as this impasse continues.
Я призываю остановиться.
I urge you to stop. The enemy is just waiting for the internal political situation to worsen in our country. It is unacceptable to play into the hands of enemy in these difficult times for the country. Before it is too late, it is necessary and it is needed to obey the will and order of the popularly elected President of the Russian Federation. Stop the columns, return them to their permanent deployment points and concentration areas.
Well, we are joined in by Colonel Shivdan Singh, retired and a defense expert. Colonel, how do you see this rebellion that is emerging in Russia? We have seen this impasse for almost a year. The Russians have been facing this huge resistance from the Ukrainians. Technically, it is a status quo situation after 6 months of their advance. But then this internal rebellion, how do you think would affect the outcome of the Ukrainian war if this rebellion is going to succeed or not succeed?
You see, right from beginning, the Russian decision to attack Ukraine was not very fair decision because Putin was trying to impose his will on Ukraine not to join NATO, whereas Ukraine is an independent country. But Putin had an imaginary feeling that if Ukraine joins NATO, then NATO forces will come to the borders of Russia and try to threaten Russia, which is not a very accurate calculation. And it was an imaginary fear which Putin had, and it was only for dominating the area that Putin was not letting Ukraine join NATO. So that's why this war was started, whereas majority of Russians did not like it. And you know, in Russian army, the troops who were retired, they were called back reservists, and they were made to fight on the borders. At the same time, certain troops are, by order, they have been made to join Russian army. So these kind of troops, they are not willing to fight. And this demand in Russian army has been long outstanding, that their soldiers were the reservist soldiers especially, who were called from their houses after retirement, they were not very willing to fight. That's why so far Russia has not been able to get any decisive victory against Ukraine, whereas Ukraine is a very small country. If all the troops or all the Russian army was willingly fighting against Ukraine, then by now Ukraine have been won 10 times. So I am fully with this revolution which is going on in Russia, that they are demanding that this war is unfair war and this war should be stopped, and at the earliest it should come to a conclusion.
Well, Colonel, one thing that I have, when you raised the issue about saying that when it is about NATO footprint, it's a wrong decision that they had taken. Now, the issue over here is NATO was founded to contain Russia, or the then Soviet Russia that existed, and also its Warsaw Pact countries. But NATO has been slowly reaching the doorsteps of Russia. And why do you think that Putin shouldn't, in fact, challenge that? Because Ukraine has been in Russian ambit. The elections, of course, in which Zelensky came in was also said to be not from a Western perspective, but from a lot of perspective from the Eastern Europe, they think that it was not fair, and that you had an existing president who was made to go, and then you had elections held and Zelensky coming into power. But so it is not technically democracy that happened over there. And when a country that feels threatened with a NATO, which in fact the entire NATO is geared to ensure that they contain Russia from moving into the plains of Europe if there was an invasion, and that is the same theory that is there. So why should Russia not fear when it comes to the war with Ukraine?
You see, I agree that Russia should have feared, but at the same time, they should have resolved the issue by talks. And since long, all world leaders, prominent leaders are only telling that they should sit across the table and they should have discussed it out. Because on such issues, war cannot find a solution. Now Zelensky has roused his nation that their integrity, their sovereignty is being threatened by Russia. So all people should rise. Imagine how much loss of the humanity is taking place in Ukraine. A lot of multi-story buildings are being collapsed. Their nuclear plants are being destroyed. Their railway system is being destroyed. Their power system is this loss of whole humanity. So this way, I've been my views. I agree. Russia had a point in persuading the Ukraine not to join NATO, and Ukraine should have also not made an effort to join NATO. It was quite an antagonizing factor for Russia. But at the same time, my submission, my advice would have been that it should have been discussed across the table, and it should have been told that when they were Soviet Sangh, that time the birth of NATO was only because to threaten Soviet Sangh. So these ideas should have been explained to Ukraine very well. And then if they had not agreeing, then should have been the task should have been taken like this.
But
So that's
Colonel,
why.
coming to the present situation, I mean, we are looking also into that present situation. How do you think, because you have Putin who's supposed to deal with the war on one side, and then they have an internal rebellion that is happening right now, and the Wagner Group is a mercenary group that has been used effectively by Russia. It has been its second sword in this war, and it has been its second sword when it comes to its international relations as well. It has effectively used the Wagner Group quite well with these mercenaries. So they are a highly trained group that is on a warpath towards Moscow, especially against the generals who are there in the Defense Department taking those decisions. So right now, what is the kind of conundrum that you think Putin would be facing with this rebellion on one side and this impasse in the Ukraine war on the other side?
You see, nowadays there is something called proxy war. In proxy war, what enemy does is that he try to disturb the fighting elements of opposite nation. Now, this way, this group who is raising the flag of rebellion against Putin, they have been motivated, they have been sort of brainwashed by the opposing nations, like complete NATO, complete America, all the countries who are supporting Ukraine. They have infiltrated their elements in this group, and they have sort of changed their thinking and made them rise against Putin. So this is the success of proxy war of NATO countries and America and Ukraine. So this is nothing new. Nowadays, this war, this tactics is being used everywhere. This is one aspect. Second aspect, this impasse which is going on between Ukraine and Russia. My suggestion is that, like our Prime Minister trying to trying right from beginning, that they should come to talking table and leave everything behind. They should discuss this issue on talking table, and this concept that NATO was raised only to threaten Russia and contain Soviet Union. This issue should be discussed there and should be told to Ukraine that don't try to join NATO. Let it be like this only. And we are assuring you, Russia should tell Ukraine, we are assuring you that nobody can threaten you in future.
Well, one of the assurance that the Russians had given when the Soviet Union was breaking up was to denuclearize Ukraine. They had taken all the weapons back and said that Russia wouldn't, in fact, go ahead and threaten Ukraine in any way, and that since both of them have cultural as well as religious ties with each other, the Ukraine thought that would have been the case. But now it looks like with tactical nuclear weapons being moved to Belarus, it's the latest that we hear. Ukraine seems to be at that receiving end, saying that they should have technically kept those nuclear weapons with them. In the context of this, how do you see the nuclear danger in this conflict rising when it comes to a rebellion on one side as well as the possible usage of nuclear weapons on the other? Because when you have an internal rebellion like this, it's a pressure that is happening, and therefore Putin might be forced to have some kind of breakthrough on the other side of the war front. So how do you see the possibility of use of tactical nuclear weapons if this rebellion succeeds in a large extent to reach Moscow, and at the same time trying to have some kind of a breakthrough on the Ukrainian front?
I can assure you in a broader way that in complete world, nuclear weapons will not be used by anybody, because everybody has seen the mass destruction which has taken place in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the second time, the way the corona fear has affected the complete world, and China is feeling isolated because of corona spread. Same way, whosoever use nuclear weapon will be outcasted by whole world. He will be economically, he will be in normal ways, he will be outcasted, and nobody will have any relation with that country, because the existence of UNO is because of against nuclear weapon use only. So complete UN nations will rise against this nation whosoever use nuclear weapon. So not anywhere in the world nuclear weapon will be used, and same way these are only a show business. This is only threatening. This is only sort of trying to put another nation in fear. Otherwise, nuclear weapons are not going to be used by anybody. In Russia cannot afford to use nuclear weapon because his interests lie with the other countries, economic interests, other interests. So the moment nuclear weapon is used by Russia, UNO will outcast Russia and Russia will have no place in the world.